Welcome back to The Grill Day 2. What a great panel conversation this morning with Miranda July. Hi there, my name is Mike Hassan, Director of Subscriptions at TheWrap. We have an exciting afternoon program lined up that's all about change. From disruptions in streaming and technology to social change in the industry. First, we will hear about streaming revolution. We will then finish up the day at 3 p.m. with back-to-back roundtable discussions on building inclusion from within. But before we begin, for those who aren't already pro members, I wanted to remind Grill ticket holders that they get a 90-day trial membership to explore Wrap Pro. So let me tell you a bit more about the platform. Wrap Pro is our subscription service that gives you deep reporting brought to you by award-winning writers, exclusive member-only video, VIP access to events and screenings throughout the year, daily curated Wrap Pro newsletters delivered to your inbox each and every day, and our Wrap Pro magazine, which is focused on the Emmy and Oscar award seasons. Our rapidly growing membership is truly a community of industry insiders and professionals. Here is a brief sample of companies that are actively using Wrap Pro each and every day to stay in the know. Here is some of the deep reporting that you will find on your very own dedicated member site every day. And last but certainly not least, in order for Grill ticket holders to take advantage of your 90-day free pass to Wrap Pro, follow these 3 easy steps. First, visit TheWrap.com/join. Second, choose monthly plan. And finally, be sure to use the code GRILL90 to waive any costs. You can also visit our member hub, TheWrap.com/pro, to take a look at what members see as they visit the site. And finally, if you have any questions at all about Wrap Pro, the platform, or how to take advantage, feel free to ping us at memberships@TheWrap.com. Thanks, everyone. Now I'm going to hand things over to TheWrap's very own Tim Basinger for your streaming panel.
Thanks, Mike. Hi, everyone. I'm Tim Basinger, Senior TV Reporter at TheWrap. I'm very excited to be leading today's panel conversation on streaming revolution, strategies in a crowded marketplace, presented by FilmRise. Unfortunately, Amy Kusner from Pluto TV was no longer able to join us, but we still have 4 amazing panelists lined up. So without further ado, let's roll out the virtual red carpet and bring them out. First up, we have Danny Fisher, who is the co-founder and CEO of FilmRise, a leading film and TV distribution studio and streaming network with over 30,000 hours of content in its library. FilmRise releases content to Amazon Prime, the Roku channel, Peacock, Pluto TV, IMDb TV, Crackle, Tubi, and many more. FilmRise is also the largest independently owned AVOD service in the United States. Next up, we have Keith Lagoy, who is the president of Worldwide Networks and Distribution for Sony Pictures Television. He manages all distribution for the company's television and home entertainment divisions. In this role, Keith oversees the physical and digital distribution of film, television, and other content to all media and retail platforms, as well as Sony Pictures Television's networks around the world. Thanks for being here, Keith. Next up, we have Rob Holmes, who is the Vice President of Programming at Roku, where he oversees the development and growth of the Roku channel, as well as the programming strategy for the company. Prior to Roku, he was with Comcast, where he developed and executed the strategy for the company's advanced advertising group to become the industry-leading solution for premium video content. Thanks for being here, Rob. And finally, but definitely not least, we have Colin Petrie Norris, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Xumo, the leading free ad-supported TV service in the United States. Xumo delivers a personal, valuable media experience through everyday touchpoints such as smart TVs, mobile devices, streaming box applications, and free channels built into the mainstream streaming services. Everyone, really thank you for being here.
Great to be here.
Okay, so let's get started. For the most part, you guys exist in the ad-supported streaming space, which, like the subscription-supported streaming space, has been just on a really big growth trajectory over the last months and years. So I want to go around the virtual room and get from each of you what in your mind has been the biggest reason that's led to this massive acceleration in the space.
This is Danny Fisher at FilmRise. We feel that basically there's obviously been massive disruption with the streaming services, especially the ad-supported streaming services. And what we really feel has happened is that in the legacy media, in the old days, the conventional wisdom has been essentially major studios and other major production companies create product and then essentially persuade their viewers to watch this product. And what we feel has happened right now is the consumer has now become the decider of the programming. Because what's happening is with so many choices, especially in the free ad-supporting environment, where you can try out services like the Roku channel without even logging in, without giving your email, credit card, or anything. You have so many opportunities to discover content, and so we feel that's just been really a sea change in basically moving from what I consider sort of dictated, you really ought to watch this, as opposed to, the consumer saying, we're going to decide what to watch. We have so many choices, so we're going to watch what we want to watch.
Yeah, I just sort of add to that. I mean, I think the kind of fundamental underlying consumer driver here, in addition to choice, is value. So I think one of the main things we're seeing here is consumers, only have a limited budget overall. They spend on things like their cell phone, their high-speed internet connection, their cable package, and increasingly consumers are recognizing that they don't actually need to spend on the cable package in order to have access to great content. Folks like Danny and others have helped to make great content available through services like the Roku channel, which is helping consumers save money. So I think that's one of the big things that's driving just cord cutting overall. But I think the rise of AVOD is really the other side of that coin. And so as consumers are recognizing they can get access to great content without having to pay a subscription, that's really appealing to them. Then comes that choice and ease of use element of, hey, I want to choose what I want to watch. And they're using services like the Roku channel to make it easy to find that great content. So I think it's really a consumer-driven, consumer-led initiative or outcome that we're seeing that we expect to continue for quite some time.
Ian, if I might add just a third perspective, and I 100% agree with my friends over there. I think the other dynamic which is affecting the market quite dramatically now is that the yield that our content partners can expect from participating in this ecosystem, the free ad-supported TV, is now getting competitive to the subscription services. So yes, consumer choice, the value option and what it means for consumers. But third, I think the content industry is embracing this as a real option. It used to be quite an experimental niche, small part of the ecosystem. But the yield per hour that you can generate, but also the scale of users now watching the service, services like ours, is getting very substantial. So I think you're going to see an acceleration of more and more content partners, content producers doing more with the space and doing better quality content. And I think that's resonating with consumers as well.
Well, as a content partner, we do partner with pretty much everybody here. I think I'd agree with that. I think what's really interesting is that really we're talking about two things here. We're talking about consumer power, and I think actually, as much as we would like to think as studios that we have this amazing power to make hits, we've always said that the people who make hits are the consumers, the people who choose to buy tickets to go and when we could go to cinemas and go and see movies in theaters, and that will come back. And people who choose to watch movies or television shows on what might call television in that quaint old world. But so definitely the people who make hits are the audience, are the consumers. And I think we've always been very, very cognizant of that. I think what's also interesting is that what we're talking about is how to connect consumers with great content. Because at the end of the day, that is what people are looking to consume. I think the beauty of the streaming revolution is it's made it so much easier for consumers to connect with the content that they love, when they want, how they want, at a time and place and on the device of their choosing. And it is that ability for us as content producers and creators to work with the streaming companies to find new and different and better ways to connect with consumers that's allowed for the increased consumption and discovery of the content we produce. And I think that's what's incredibly exciting as we see this new landscape emerge.
Can I follow up, Tim, on one of the in addition to the value, the consumer choice, one of the things we've done at, FilmRise, and I think, my partners are aware of that, and people, partners in the industry, well aware of is, about 8 years ago in the founding of FilmRise, we developed, a set of algorithms to essentially identify, especially undervalued, content that was, content that's been under the radar, and using, algorithms, and right now we're using artificial intelligence and machine learning and automation, to refine the process that we started 8 years ago. And what we've done is actually provide content to the streaming platforms that I think they, on their own, would not have really identified. So as an example of very recent release, we've released on the Roku channel, Pluto TV, and some others, Sumo, is the show The Rifleman, which is over 6 decades old, and it's black and white. It's hardly your Game of Thrones. It's hardly the kind of thing that's over the radar. But yet our algorithms have shown it to be unbelievably high demand, and we've released it, and it's become one of the most successful and highly watched content in the ad-supported ecosystem. And I kind of feel that this plays into the consumer as the as the programmer, and I think by together with what Rob said is about the value proposition is with so many platforms available and they keep growing. The platforms themselves are growing. The Roku channel is much bigger today than it was a month ago, and the Pluto TV is bigger than it was a month ago, et cetera. And so you have platforms growing within each platform, but you also have proliferation of new platforms like Peacock and Redbox and others. And so what this has done is actually introduce so much content. From our perspective at FilmRise, we feel like one of our major contributions to the industry has really been surfacing content that has really been sort of just sitting on the shelf. Say Forensic Files and Unsolved Mysteries with Robert Stack, both of which have been rebooted. One by HLN, the other by Netflix. And we feel that we have feel like we've participated. We were not involved in the reboots, but we certainly feel like helped further popularize this content. And so I kind of feel that the use of analytics to measure consumer demand, as opposed to what the sort of conventional wisdom demand has been a really key part for us. But it wouldn't exist without the ability to actually expose this content on channels like the Roku channel. Without that, you wouldn't be we wouldn't have a platform in which to do so.
Yeah, Danny, you brought up a good point in terms of how successful The Rifleman has been for FilmRise. Because you see a lot of discussion in the media about streaming rights for old sitcoms, like you hear Friends and Seinfeld, but TV started before the 1990s, and so there's a lot of older content that is maybe going untapped. So what is that opportunity there for streaming services to grab some of the stuff from the 70s, from the 60s, and even before?
Come and get it. We have plenty of it. We are, as we have an amazing library of classic television shows and incredible movies that we are always eager to put in front of new audiences in new ways, and where appropriate with new business models. So I think that is definitely a conversation that we have always been open to and remain open to and will continue to be open to. So come on board.
Yeah, and look, I think just to talk about that at a higher level, obviously you've mentioned some of these really popular shows that are transacting at very large prices, I think in part because they're the reason why somebody might subscribe to one service or another. But the population of content, the pool of content that has that level of impact is pretty small. Obviously, there's a lot of value in it, which is why you're seeing the prices that you are. But there is a ton of content, not even just, obviously, Danny raised something that was a library, sort of deep library title, but I think across a really broad range, there's content that might not bring a user into a subscription service, but they would happily watch on an ad-supported basis. And there's an opportunity, I think Colin sort of pointed this out, for content owners to access this growing monetization in the TV world in a much more direct way than they ever could in working with sort of an existing TV network. And so we are working with folks like Keith and his team to bring some of that content in on some of these new business models. And I don't want to speak for him, but I think they're certainly very happy with the kinds of results that they're seeing. And I think that this new model, this openness, really opens up those kinds of opportunities for those who are willing to experiment. And I think they're seeing great results.
You know, the other thing that is like, there is no constraint really to the number of channels that sort of can be added to a service or individual videos. It's unlike traditional cable where you've got a fixed amount of real estate and you've got to program enough hits in there and a little bit of discovery. These are very dynamic. We have a very sort of malleable front end. You can highlight channels to different users. You can adapt what people see. We like the idea of serendipity and algorithms sort of informing consumer choice. And I think the lovely thing is there's not like, you know, while most services go for 200, 300 channels, there's no technical constraint to going to 500 or 700 or 1,000. And as people and more consumers come on board and it creates the right business and economics for our partners, you know, I think the discovery of deep library content will continue to thrive. I'm personally a big fan of the 80s right now. I'm watching a lot of Cobra Kai. I think most of everybody else is. And I think what that's driving is a bunch of new 80s discovery. Like there's a bunch of 80s stuff that's suddenly popping up and becoming really popular. And, you know, I think it's informed by a big hit. And then people go, well, I want to see more of that. And we can adapt to that kind of thing. And that's, I think, sort of the beauty, some of the beauty of the system is that real estate is much larger than you can with a traditional guide.
Yeah, and Colin raises a really important point. You know, in addition to the value proposition, of no entry fee in the ad-supported space, that unlimited shelf space. I mean, the unlimited shelf space again, falls into what I started out as the premise of basically, the consumer is now the programmer, and when you have an unlimited shelf space, then it gives the platforms, platforms like the Roku channel can actually experiment and can actually say, well, we're not sure about this, but let's let's try it out and let's see if an audience develops for it. And we certainly have had a lot of success with the Roku channel, where we brought in content that they'd never heard of, we weren't sure about, and then they picked up an audience. An example is Midsummer Murders. The Roku channel was like, what's this? We're not really sure about it, and it's developed into one of the highest performing shows on the channel, and no one we had a good sense of it, but we don't know for sure if the ad-supported consumer is going to go for a British mystery that's an hour and 40 minutes per episode. We had some questions as to whether that would translate, and apparently it did. And so because you have this unlimited shelf space, the Roku channel is not constricted by that shelf space and can actually offer so much more choice. And it speaks to what to Colin's point there.
Yeah, I mean, just to add one thing to that, the unlimited shelf space works, but you also need to have a really large audience so that you can sort of find the right audience for that content. So Roku overall is the #1 streaming platform in the US. We shared some numbers a few weeks ago, but 43 million monthly active accounts, with up to over 12 million accounts year over year. So really substantial growth, but even more so in growth in streaming hours. So over 14 billion streaming hours. We added about 6 billion year over year, 65% growth in streaming hours. So we're getting over 3.5 hours per user per day, which gives us a really large pool to draw from to bring people into the Roku channel and engage with the kind of content that Danny was just talking about. And so it might not be perfect for everybody, but if you have that direct relationship with the user, you have that broad pool of consumption, you can help to make recommendations, to target the right ads, to bring the right people into the experience to connect with that content.
I think just kind of building on something that Rob said earlier about, we have, done great sort of experimental partnerships, I think, with Roku. And I think what we're doing is to really enjoy the learning, and I think one of the aspects of this that is obviously very different to a conventional relationship with ad-supported cable or broadcast television is that opportunity to learn together, to discover together, to experiment together. I think one of the things that's going to be really important as this partnership evolves is going to be the extent to which we can really get into sharing information. And I know that can become a contentious thing, and there are all sorts of privacy considerations. But if we want to become the partners that I think you would want us to become, and that we want to become, then obviously the more we can understand what is the consumer journey, what is the what is the level of appreciation, what are the things that are really making a difference to audiences and to the platforms that they are coming to consume content on, then the better we are going to be able to be as co-curating content partners for you to help make that consumer experience as strong as possible, and therefore their relationship with the platform as engaged as possible. And I think that is going to be one of the areas I think that we're going to want to continue to explore with you, as you know.
Yeah, I just want to be clear, because it is obviously a topic in the space. I mean, from a consumer privacy standpoint, we're never exchanging any data with partners that consumers would be concerned about, but absolutely in the aggregate, what content is connecting with what users, where are we seeing interest and have, and sort of if we were going to program together, Keith talked about what do we think we want to see more of, and where do we think the economic opportunity lies for both of us, and we have the opportunity to share that. So I think it has been a great partnership, particularly around that opportunity to do more of what's working.
Yeah, I'd like to address the whole nature of competition. The four panelists here, are technically competitors. I've never believed, I've never had a business philosophy about competition. I've always believed in collaboration. And while we're technically competitors, I mean, we're so closely aligned with the Roku channel. We're closely aligned with Sumo. With Sony, I just looked at my inbox today and I saw that we're preparing, a pretty substantial offer to Sony, which you'll be, I'm sure, hearing about, Keith, over the next few days. We work together. Even Amy couldn't join us from Pluto TV, but Pluto TV and the Roku channel are theoretically competitors. But yet, what would Pluto TV without its presence on the Roku on the Roku platform? I mean, it's certainly a key platform. And of course, since the last few days, we've seen a company with called Peacock, and seems like Rob, you guys have worked things out, and that's very exciting that Peacock is now a Roku. People have to work together, and one of the things we're really seeing is that certainly seeing in the ad-supported space is everybody's working together, and I see 99% collaboration and 1% competition. Rob, maybe you disagree, but that's what I see.
I think it's an interesting question, because I think on the one hand, this is an industry that didn't exist. Well, it was YouTube videos and short form clips and seas of thumbnails that existed for a long time. But this notion of the free ad-supported TV side was 7-8 years old. And I think what it has is we've all been working very closely, because it's something which collaboration has driven consumer awareness. It's driven the ad market to being aware of this as an option. It's driven the content industry to embrace the service. So, I think Zumo has a dual business model where, same engine, but we have an enterprise offering where we power partners' platforms, do channels for people, and ad engines for large, consumer electronics and mobile carriers and the like. And we also have a direct to consumer. And so Zumo really is born and bred out of partnering and helping out people which could arguably be our competition. But we've seen so much value created by that collaboration, and they've sort of the rising sea level or the rising water level has just lifted all the boats. Fast forward 5 years, 10 years, I think what's the collective reach of free ad-supported TV services across the US today? Total unduplicated reach, probably 60 million, 70 million kind of homes. Is that going to go to 80, 90, and then we're going to start to need to fight with each other a bit more to sort of, I don't know. It's still a brand new industry, but right now it's very collaborative, and I think in a very positive way.
I think that's right. I mean, I think when obviously the industry is in growth mode, it's much easier and actually much more sensible for everyone to be collaborating to grow the collective pie. We find ourselves in a very fortunate position in a way as a sort of independent studio where we genuinely do not compete with anybody and even won't be in 5 years' time. But what we will be able to do is to partner with everybody with our content. And that is, that's the position we took as the arms dealer of entertainment. Our weapons are emotion and laughter and smiles and enjoyment. But but that is the position we find ourselves. And I think for us, we love that position because it allows us to truly partner with everyone and to not worry about where the competitive future may lie, but to really do what we can to help this business grow. Because the healthier this business is, the better that is for all of us, and certainly the better that is for us as an independent studio.
Mm-hmm. And you guys have kind of mentioned a little bit, but one thing that the legacy media model has always been kind of centered around is the idea of windows. Something's in theater, something's on DVD, something's on specific cable channels, and it's kind of in the subscription space a little bit. See the fight over Friends and Seinfeld, who gets what rights. It was always centered around this philosophy that putting your content in too many places is going to cannibalize each other. But you guys would argue the opposite of that, right?
I definitely argue the opposite of that because we've seen it, we've tested, we've proven it out over 8 years. We take the same show, we put it on a single platform, and then we put it on 2 platforms. Instead of seeing 50-50, it's actually 105% and 105%. We put it on 3 platforms, 110% times 3. It's actually we're in the business, especially in surfacing content that has been sort of under the radar. We're in the business of actually introducing content and popularizing it by simply exposing it to people, and people say, "Wow, this is great!" This has been around for years or decades or even multiple, half a century. But this is the we really like seeing this. So we're definitely not seeing. We definitely don't believe in the in the old windowing model for the most part.
Well, I think it depends. I think that there is some content that will still lend itself very well to multiple different forms of consumption. If you make a movie like Spider-Man or a movie like Jumanji that costs a lot of money to make, and that we then invest a lot of money again to market it, we are going to want to give people the opportunity to see it first on the big screen in a collective experience with a lot of people, and to really enjoy that together. And then we will give people the chance to then consume it at home through successive ways of doing that. But I think that we're definitely in an era where one distribution model does not have to be a cookie cutter approach. We're going to have different ways of approaching distribution for different pieces of content that are most suitable for those pieces of content. And that's going to mean different degrees of exclusivity or different approaches to doing it, because you've got to reach consumers where they are. And definitely consumers have more ways of consuming the content they love than they've ever had before. And that does lead to a greater degree of fragmentation. And therefore the issue does become less about cannibalizing and more about reaching people. Because our goal is always to reach as many people as we can with the content that we produce. It's just that the way in which we may get to do that is going to vary depending on the individual movie or the individual TV show or the individual piece of content in our library.
Yeah, Keith, there's no question about that. FilmRise has recently entered into launching into original productions on the episodic side. And we also, release, new releases. And on our newer releases, we're on the more traditional, going from TVOD, cable, transactional into DVD, et cetera. And on the original episodics, there's the economics, involves some, form of exclusivity. We're experimenting with hybrid models where the exclusivity, is, maybe there's a 1-year exclusivity and then it goes out wide. So it really depends on the economic model. Obviously, I don't think you can make Game of Thrones and then just throw it on, Roku channel and Pluto TV and and make your $8 trillion back in a couple of weeks. So it really depends on the content. Correct.
I think Rob's in plans to do that by this time next year, right, Rob? You're gonna write that kind of checks.
No, I mean, look, I do think, and I mentioned this before, I think there's sort of a bifurcation here related to content, right? So if you're a subscription service, you need to justify the money that the user is spending with you every month. And so you have to be rolling out these big budget originals, these recent window movies, things that were in theaters. It totally makes sense if you're trying to build that business, but there is so much other content. And some of that content isn't the reason why somebody's going to subscribe to a service. And the sooner you experiment with it, in the AVOD marketplace, I think the more return you're going to see there. So I think it'll actually be incumbent upon folks to recognize, do I have a hit? Do I have one of those top of the pyramid things that the SVODs are really going to be looking for? It's really going to drive subscriptions, or is this something that's just going to benefit from being as broadly available as soon as possible while people are still interested in it and aware of it from that sort of initial marketing push? So I think we're going to get a lot more flexible here.
The part of the industry, and I think windowing in general, I think will exist for a long time, and it's in the sense that it is right now. The intersection point, or the layer that I'm most interested in right now is the one between subscription and free ad supported, and particularly in the movies and certainly the type of content that's been discussed. And I mentioned it earlier, but the yield per hour that started off in ad supported was very small. Now, as the CTV advertising is much higher CPMs, the ad loads this content can sustain is getting to be competitive, and then the scale, 60-70 million users watching it, is causing titles which were previously only in the subscription window to start getting tested much more frequently. And across all of our partners, we're seeing that sort of testing. That's kind of the story of this year, has been, let me try out a content title that I might have just given to one of my sort of skinny bundle partners. And I think that is the one to watch, is that transition will happen more quickly. Sort of linear news really embraced this service, the NBC Nows, the CBSNs, or the ABC News. That is now, that's a big business for these companies. It's, we couldn't get live news in free ad supported TV 2 years ago. It was all clip-based curation. And so I think you're going to start seeing more and more acceleration into this. Not wholesale. I don't think you're going to take studio titles for cinema release and get them in there anytime soon. But I think it's starting to change. The boundaries are starting to shift.
Yeah, I think. Go ahead,
Rob.
Well, I was just going to say, just quickly, Matt, I totally agree that we're seeing a lot more experimentation. We think it makes sense. And, I think trying to figure out what is the content partner looking for when they do that experimentation. We think it's where can I get the best monetization for this content? If I want a viewer to watch this movie or this show somewhere in the AVOD ecosystem, which of these partners is going to deliver me the best value? And I think certainly with the Roku platform, the Roku channel, we have that relationship with the user. We have a substantial focus on ad sales. I think part of our focus is to drive the best monetization that we can for a partner when they bring those types of opportunities for us. And so I think that's a big dynamic here is where are you going to be best served by making the content available? How do you do that experimentation? To what Keith mentioned, you're sort of learning together to try to ultimately grow your long-term opportunity.
Completely agree here. I want to just bring up two, I think, major developments in the AVOD service. Obviously, the ad-supported streaming world is growing, as I said, within each platform, but also additional platforms coming on board. But I see two major areas that are seeing very, very high growth and really high opportunity. One is the international space, where I feel in the international space, it's like 3 to 5 years, behind where the U.S. is, and the U.S. has not reached, maturation level. But in international, we're seeing, it's small, but we're seeing the rate of growth, internationally on the AVOD services is, like the Roku channel, Pluto TV, and others. The rate of growth is really, really high. Very month-over-month growth is extremely high. So we see that as really a very, very big opportunity for everybody. The other area that I think we should touch on, that's a very high growth area, is a new experience, relatively new experience, really popularized, I believe, really by Pluto TV, which is the digital linear service, the so-called FAST service, of replicating live television, even for sitcoms and dramas and all that, which is a pre-program. At first, I didn't get it at all. It didn't make any sense to me. It says, why would somebody turn something on in the middle of a show? It didn't make any sense to me. And then I realized, people take a lot of, people take, I don't know if it takes 8 minutes or there's some amount of time where people who are looking for video on demand, it requires, mental energy to figure out, what do I really want to watch? What do I want to commit to watching, spending for the next half hour, or 2 hours? And the fast linear model is a pre-programmed model. It's kind of replicating the television of the 50s and bringing it into the 21st century. And it's you just turn on the television, you turn on the channel that you like on the Roku channel, on Pluto TV, on Zumo, and you just say, you know what, this is a channel I like. Let me just, let me turn it on and just, kind of sit back on my couch, and whatever's on is on. And I think it's it's becoming a really appealing, portion of the ad-supported ecosystem. And I'm sure Colin and Rob can speak very specific to it. Colin especially has been, really at the forefront, of syndicating out these, linear fast channels. But love to hear what everybody thinks on both the fast side and also the international side.
On sort of each of those subjects, so international, I think you're right. It's a 3-year, probably accelerate. I think the gap is narrowing. I don't know if it's going to take 3 years to get to the US, because a lot of the technical questions have been worked out with US TV manufacturers and streaming platforms. And I think the scale actually is potentially even greater on a relative basis. In some kind of, we're partners, our smart TV partners, where we are delivering content through our enterprise partnerships, typically amount to close to 75 to 80% of smart TVs sold in Latin America, Western Europe, Asia Pacific. And they've watched the US develop this model and the yield that emerges from it. And they are not waiting 3 years to get going with it. I think you're seeing, I think international is going to have a very rapid adoption. The yield per user, the online ad markets is the limit, the constraint. The ads, how big is the digital video market in Italy versus on a per consumer basis versus the US? These are smaller spend per capita markets, so that's going to affect the model, but the relative scale is greater. So yeah, I think I agree with you. We're very much engaged and are growing very quickly internationally, and expanding our distribution and the content lineup. It's in all markets.
Okay. And there's one thing that was discussed yesterday at TheGrill. This future of theatrical and that model, especially the windowing model. It seems to be changing. I'm thinking of the Universal AMC Theaters deal that allows Universal to, put a film on streaming or another platform, 17 days after it hits theaters. So it does seem those windows, as we move forward after the pandemic, are going to be shrinking. But what I want to know from you guys is, where do you guys think the AVOD space sits in kind of all that changing, windows?
Well, I mean, I think Universal have obviously announced their deal with AMC. I do think that we're obviously in the middle of just an unprecedented situation, and one shouldn't necessarily derive too much inference based on what goes on in the middle of an unprecedented global pandemic. I will tell you that we firmly believe in the theatrical experience. We are going to continue to make theatrical movies and release them in theaters because that's something that is an experience we believe consumers want to enjoy. I think in terms of where AVOD fits in, I think that's to be seen, whether that's in the US or anywhere else around the world. Clearly, it is going to be a much bigger, much more significant part of the media landscape, both for consumers, because it's a great consumer experience, but also for content partners, because it does offer, as we've been talking about for the past little while, all of the different opportunities of experimentation and monetization and discovery, and really connecting with consumers in a different way around the content that we produce that is very, very, very appealing to everybody. So I think it is going to be an increasingly important part of the media landscape, and I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think there's definitely going to be sort of more robust and flexible windowing here. If you think about the PVOD opportunity, so that transactional opportunity for a movie that's still in theaters, we think that's an amazing thing for consumers from a choice standpoint. I've got young kids at home. It's expensive to do the babysitter and the night out to go to the movies, but we love going to the movies. And so we might do it some amount of the time for something that's really big that we want to see, collectively. But also there's a movie that our friends are talking about. We really want to see it, but maybe it doesn't justify a night out. I think even at a premium price point, it's a really compelling opportunity. We've seen just sort of consumers really loving that choice, particularly right now, given everything that's going on. But we'd love to see that, and we expect to see that continue to be part of the landscape going forward as theatrical distribution sort of has that optionality. So I think that's definitely one element. You're also starting to see folks like you saw Disney do with Disney Plus and Hamilton and Mulan, where it's really also part of pushing forward their big direct-to-consumer services. And so I think that's an interesting choice for content owners as well, is to think about where am I best served by releasing this particular movie, even once things are sort of back and open again. So I think there's a lot of choice, a lot of opportunity, and letting consumers access it as long as you tune it the right way, I think can really be an incremental opportunity for everybody. And then there's going to be content that I do think will move into the AVOD window pretty quickly because consumers want to watch it. I think there's a great opportunity with it, but I think you have to move through some of these sort of higher monetization windows first to really get a sense of, is this a breakout hit? Is it going to be worth substantially more kind of through other models before it arrives in the AVOD world?
Yeah, well, I would say my feeling about the theatrical world is I've got a nice television setup, at home, and, surround sound and all that. And, it's probably better, it might be better visual and sound than I have in my local movie theater. But I kind of feel that the theaters are here to stay. They're not going away. I just think it's evolved into a different kind of experience. And I think you're starting to see theaters that are offering, food and cocktails, and it's a social event. It's a different kind of event. I think I heard someone in the industry compare, the competition is not with the VOD streaming world. It's a competition with the bowling alley. It's a different kind of. It's basically going out. It's a night out. It's a date night out. It's a family night out. And theaters, I think, are going to adapt by offering all these other kind of perks like food and drinks and other things. And obviously it's also, I actually agree with Rob. I think, seeing, something like Mulan, which is, costs, $15,000, transactional or whatever it costs, it's a lot of money. But, I actually think it's a tremendous opportunity to, get people to subscribe to, Disney Plus. And I actually think that, the higher end, really, very, very high demand new releases, I actually think there's going to be a disruption from the transactional, side, the transactional VOD side. Say, hey, I can, okay, maybe it's $30, but I mean that's spread out across my family, and I don't think, I don't have to, buy, $80 popcorn and, all that stuff. I just, I don't have to leave the house. I think that's going to be very, very compelling. So I think that represents a new disruption as well. That whole model.
I think Danny is right. I think Cocktails with a movie. I mean, that's where you got me there, Danny. I think you're 100% correct. That's my new local movie theater. As I tell you, they're gonna keep my loyal and me as a loyal customer as long as I make those delicious cocktails and hamburgers. So, but yeah, no, I think I agree with that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, guys, it's been a great conversation. I think now we're going to go to some questions from the audience. Okay, so I'll just read them off for you. In the COVID era, when the consumer runs out of disposable income, put the question back on the screen. Okay, in the COVID era, when the consumer runs out of disposable income, what will happen to the entertainment market?
I think it's a great. I think we're all very much believers. I think one of the early points made was, I think Rob made around value, right? In this environment, it is particularly important for consumers to get entertainment at great value. And yes, you're trading a few minutes of your hour to watch ads and sometimes get some value from that. But I think there's I think we collectively play an important role in a difficult time, and we've seen massive acceleration in the business, and it's an unfortunate thing to be related to. But yes, the pandemic has created much more awareness. But I do think even on an ongoing basis beyond this, and hopefully we reach back to a place of some normalcy sometime soon. But I think we'll continue to look at that, what value we add. It's interesting with the subscription services, you get maybe 3, 4, 5, 6, and you start to go, well, now I'm getting a bit of subscription fatigue. And we've all talked about this at various times. But does that necessarily mean that you're only going to have 4, 5, 6 AVOD services? I think you've got room for niche services. I think you've got room for big major services. And I think the consumers can switch without registration and without any hassle between them. Is the AVOD market going to have 40 players in it, 50 players in it? Because I think they provide great value. And so I think you're going to see both the emergence of niche, super targeted services and then broad reach services emerge in a very, so there's going to be a proliferation of more companies like us, I guess, in the next few years. Hopefully not too competitive with us, but yeah, but I think it's going to be more.
I agree with Colin on that. Specifically in the COVID era and COVID-like, era where disposable income, that's where we're seeing where disposable income is becoming tricky and more difficult, more challenging. That's exactly the time when people are discovering services like the Roku channel, where they don't have to pay anything, and they can discover lots of different choices. And so I actually think I think the ad-supported, the free ad-supported service provides a service to people without, with less disposable income, and not everybody can afford to have Netflix and HBO Max and Disney Plus, and not everybody can afford to have to pay for 20 different services, or 8 different services, or even 2 different services. And so I think that's where the where the ad-supported free services really contribute really a service, frankly, to society.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. Do you believe the freedom of streaming services' ability to produce original content is going to change the types of project that win awards in the future?
I think it's going to broaden it. I think we've already seen a significant evolution in the types of content that win awards. And I think that that's a journey that's going to be an ongoing one. I think, look, the beauty of having more companies who are committed to great storytelling and to providing compelling entertainment for their viewers, subscribers, cinema goers, DVD buyers, for consumers. Then, and we've seen this with, everyone talks about peak TV and this, and what's happened is, as the number of television shows has gone up, the quality and the engagement of television shows has gone up, because the competitive dynamic forces everyone to play at their best. When we make a movie, we say, good isn't good enough. You've got to be great. You've got to make impact. You've got to impact the culture. And that is the way in which you cut through in a world in which there are a myriad of entertainment options open to every single consumer. And so I think that the opening up of more places who are commissioning original content is going to increase the level and increase the range of shows that can be contenders for awards. And if you wanted a very easy contemporary example of that, look at what happened with Schitt's Creek at the Emmys on Sunday, which is a show that didn't, that came from Canada. But if you look at what's happened with The Crown, our show, Casa de Papel, Narcos, I mean, the opening up, not just in the US to different types of services, but frankly, and with Parasite on the Oscars side, to the internationalization of our business, where great content and great stories can now truly come from anywhere, and then play a very powerful role in terms of shaping the awards conversation and the culture, then that is something I think we should all be extremely happy about and excited for.
I think there's one other area, one area that FilmRise has embarked on an initiative over the last few months, is working with actually individual filmmakers, honestly on a shoestring budget basis, but people who have developed a following, a tremendous following, like following in the millions, and working with them on actually creating, helping them to create long form content that could be work on the streaming channels. And these are not high funded. These are people who are basically it's sweat equity. These are people who have developed an audience, have developed their own style, developed their own stardom. And I could certainly see awards going to people who are these kind of individual creators working on a shoestring budget. And these streaming services, especially the ad-supported streaming services, where there's this large virtual shelf space to experiment with that, I think lead to some surprises in the future in the awards category.
Yeah, I think I'd make probably not that insightful, but just I'll throw it out there. I'm going to tell you, I think a year from now we have a panel again. I think you're going to see the emergence of original programming in this space in a very substantial way. I think it goes to the competition, the need to differentiate. It goes to all those questions. It's a natural progression. I think what we started with was rev share content that was available for everybody. We're collectively now going to studios and sort of individual licensed and exclusive. And I think one of the next stage of the journey will be us all starting to think about, well, what is completely unique? What do we own? Is there something that we need to work with partners on that front? And I think that'll start to happen as you start need to tell a different story to consumers about why you want to be here versus there. So that's a great question. And maybe not a year from now, maybe it's 2 years for it to be a big deal, but it's going to come. And the economics just suggest it'll happen. So,
yeah, I probably have a bit of a different take on that. I mean, I think in the subscription world, you clearly need it because you've got to justify that spend from the customer every month. But in the ad-supported world, I mean, I think original content would be one way to differentiate, but I do think the economics are quite challenged. And I think one thing that with this sort of broad proliferation of content, it's really about discovery. And so how can consumers find their way to you, to that content? And then how can you drive monetization around that? And so, I think that the platforms, Roku and the Roku channel in particular, are going to have something of a unique advantage there in bringing users into the experience. And then it's more about, how can you be part of these experiences that consumers are vesting with the volume of their consumption You're one of our partners in our EPG that we launched a few months ago, and that's just made it easier for consumers to find content. It's those kinds of experience that we think are going to drive the volume here, maybe more so than a specific individual piece of original content.
All right, guys, I think that's all the time we have left. Once again, really want to thank our amazing panelists. Really appreciate you guys being here. And for you guys, the audience members, really appreciate you taking the time out of your day, wherever you are, to join us. And we'll see you over at our Wrap Connect Slack channel for the post-panel discussion at 2:30 p.m., which will be followed by our Building Inclusion from Within roundtables at 3 p.m. Once again, really appreciate taking the time out to be here. Stay safe, and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.